Welcome, everyone. Today we have the honor of having three distinct guests here across various different sectors of the LST and LRT DeFi. Maybe let's go around with introductions, right? And then we can kickstart the panel from there. Radlin?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Radlin. I'm the Head of Business Development for the Magpie MegaDAO. I'm here today representing one of our sub-DAOs, which is Eigenpie, which is a liquid restaking token protocol built on top of EigenLayer.
Hi everyone, my name is Kean. I've been in crypto for around 8 years. Started my career in Deloitte doing financial services, capital markets, consulting and crypto. I was then in Consensus for around 5 years, mainly working on MetaMask Institutional and Fiora and staking. And now currently I'm a contributor to Lido and I focus on Lido Institutional.
Hey there, I'm Ben. I kind of got into crypto over COVID when it felt like the government was printing so much money, I might as well try to do so too. That led me into kind of getting into tokenomics, and I've got a lot of experience in engineering and DevOps. I currently work at Balancer, which is a DEX that does a lot of specialized stuff, one of which is focused on LSTs and LRTs. And I kind of jump back and forth between like engineering and business development and tokenomics.
Yeah, you guys are humble. Just for context, Eigenpie is probably one of the largest LRTs within the space. No one needs an introduction to Lido, right? You guys have been leading the wave in terms of liquid staking. And then, of course, Balancer, you guys have been one of the key DEXs, even from the OG days. But perhaps probably in this particular panel, we really want to deep dive into the landscape of staking, how staking has been over the past few years. Maybe we can kick things off for maybe those that are not familiar. Maybe if Kean, you're able to share like more about Lido. How did Lido start? And then we can take it off from there.
Sure, yeah. So maybe for context, firstly on native staking. So if you think of native staking, you're taking your ETH, you're locking it up, and you're generating a reward or return. Which is obviously really important, securing the network. But the real issue there is liquidity. You're locking up capital, it's not that capital efficient. And this would probably be where Lido comes in the sense of Lido is a liquid staking protocol. And effectively how that would work is you would go to Lido, stake your ETH, and then in return you're given a utility token called stETH. And stETH basically represents your staking rewards. And stETH is a liquid token in the sense of you can take stETH, for example, deploy it into DeFi, a liquidity pool, or more in the traditional sense, you can use stETH as collateral. And really what Lido is trying to do with stETH is this idea of capital efficiency. So you're getting almost like double rewards depending on what you're using stETH for. So like I mentioned, you're getting the underlying staking reward, which is probably around 3%. And then depending on what you're doing with stETH, you could obviously generate higher returns. In terms of Lido itself, it was launched as a DAO in 2020. The whole idea of a DAO obviously is a decentralized autonomous organization. And I suppose what Lido is trying to do is practice what it preaches in the sense of being decentralized and transparent. Anyone who is a Lido governance token holder, so LDO, they basically have a vote in how the DAO is run. So one LDO token equals one vote.
I think staking for Ethereum, I mean, it's a wave, right? Ethereum first came from a proof of work and then migrated over into a staking, proof of stake. We have liquid staking, which Lido has kickstarted. I think ever since the past year, restaking became more of a phenomenon, right? Probably one of the highest growth sectors within the space. I mean, Eigenpie, you guys kickstarted off. Right now, you guys have like more than $1 billion in TVL. But how do you see the entire restaking sector, like, and of course, like, what does Eigenpie do as well?
Yeah, so sure. So as Kean mentioned, liquid restaking was kind of created to provide capital efficiency, and restaking is another layer on top of that, basically. So it allows a user to take their STETH, their staked ETH, restake it in an Eigenpie, and earn staking rewards on top of their staking rewards without having to actually unlock their staked ETH. So a user could basically take the ETH, lock it in a Lido, get STETH, and earn an underlying APR of about 2.93% currently, I'd say. Deposit it take that STE, deposit it into a restaking protocol, and earn staking yield on that. That's still kind of being worked out with EigenLayer around what that sort of APR will be, but you're probably looking around the, I'd say probably 3 to 6% range with the various airdrops that you potentially get for restaking in EigenLayer. So you have all this underlying yield, right, maybe 6 to 10%, and then you can still take your receipt token and go and do DeFi with it and unlock, well, you know, depending where you want to put it, anywhere from probably 5 to 20-something% in APRs. And I think one of the big sort of growers of restaking is the DeFi element of it. I think once restakers realized and restaking protocols realized the levers they have in DeFi, and I'm talking about like Pendle Finance, they were a big lever for a lot of LRTs. There was massive growth through them. Your gearboxes, balances, and there was a lot of sort of DeFi Legos that just fell into place, and people realized that there's so much yield available out there, and that really boosted it. I mean, EigenLayer went from like $1 billion to like $15 billion in the course of 3 months. I mean, that was the, you know, astronomical growth. TVLS pulled back a little bit, which was expected. But yeah, so I think the whole restaking space and where it's going, I think we're all kind of waiting to see how the sort of AVS ecosystem takes shape, what opportunities are available to users. But I think ultimately for me, and I was watching one of the talks yesterday, and when you speak of innovation, I know we're always looking for the next big thing, you know, but for me, the next big thing is how do we make restaking, staking, DeFi so easy that my grandmother can do it and not even know she's doing it, you know? And I think that's the big innovation that I'm kind of waiting for in the space, you know. And to give context to that, when we launched Eigenpie, obviously I was excited about the whole thing, and I'd reached out to family and friends who had been in crypto longer than I was. You know, some of them had introduced me to crypto. You know, so I reached out to them and I was like, hey, if you have any staked ETH, come and deposit it in Eigenpie. And the response was, what is staked ETH? You know, these were people that are in crypto years more than me, but had never gone into DeFi, had never even realized that there's sort of this rabbit hole that you can go down to. And it kind of made me take a step back and realize, okay, we still have a lot of work to do in this space to really get mass adoption. I mean, you have people that are in crypto for years and don't even know what STETH is. You know, to us in the DeFi space, it's like, who doesn't know? You know, but you realize that there's this wide world out there that is unaware of what we're doing in DeFi. And I think that's where the great innovation is going to be, is if we can somehow create an on-ramp where they can do it without even being aware of it.
Makes sense. I mean, if we double click on that just for a moment, right? What's staking? And yield is one thing. Where does the yield come from is another thing, right? I think it would be great maybe if we can uncover what does staking yield, where does it come from, and then also the restaking yield side of house. Anyone?
I'll take a stab at it. But so if you think about Bitcoin or proof of work Ethereum, right, the idea is you spend lots of money on electricity to solve crypto problems that are kind of unnecessary to solve, but when you solve that problem, you then get a block and you get paid for it. The idea of moving to proof of stake is that instead of just burning all this unnecessary power, you have people like stake ETH that they already have to represent like a share of that validation, and then those nodes get selected based on having ETH stake. So it basically moves from burning unnecessary amounts of electricity to taking the actual token and making that the thing that kind of signals validation. And so from that, right, you get about this 3% yield, which again, before was basically offsetting the cost of like running a bunch of GPUs.
Cool. I mean, that's staking, right? So
Yeah.
on the staking side, largely the yield comes from two sources. One is the transaction fees that people used to pay,
Yep.
right? And then if it's not sufficient, then it will be based on the inflation, right, of the chain itself. What about restaking? Like, I'm curious about restaking because restaking is a new phenomenon. What's the underlying? Where does the additional yield come from? I mean, airdrops is one thing, but what else apart from which?
I mean,
Yeah,
I
think I would say that, as Ben said, it's the same sort of thing. It's basically staking rewards based in whatever protocol, whether it's an eigen layer, whether it's a symbiotic, all these different sort of restaking layers that are being spun up currently. So the staking rewards come from fees generated, as I said, the AVSs that build on those networks. You as a restaker are basically providing security for all these different protocols, AVSs, and those sort of fees come back to you and come back into the ecosystem.
Got it. So in other words, it's more of like providing economic security.
Yes.
That if, let's say, the services that's built on top of those restaking platforms, they will have to pay fees, and that's where it then funnels through to those that's providing the underlying collateral or the restaking asset as security for that particular service that they're providing. Okay, makes sense.
And also as well, I can just add one more caveat there, is that when it comes to restaking as well, like with staked ETH, you are providing security to the Ethereum ecosystem. When you're looking at something like an eigen layer, you could be providing security to a Cosmos or any blockchain really. So it's not just for Ethereum, and that's kind of where initially there was some concern in the Ethereum ecosystem around what happens if it's more lucrative to kind of validate on Eigenlayer and validate for Cosmos as opposed to Ethereum. Now you'd have a situation where validators might be more inclined to validate for Cosmos and spend more of their time there because rewards are greater and kind of sideline Ethereum. So there were some concerns there. I guess we'll have to work through that as we go. But I think that's also something to be aware of. Makes
sense. Let's switch gears as well. I mean, like, we have not heard a lot about Balancer, right? But it would be great if, let's say, you can share as a DEX, right? Sure. Out there, how do you guys interact with asset issuers like the different LST and LRTs out there?
Sure. So I think, one of the things that is an element of DeFi that makes it different from other finances is this concept of composability, right? So it's the idea that you have a token, and then you can put that token in something else and do something with it, and then you can actually tokenize that again. Like you can put ETH and ST-ETH, and then you can tokenize that into an LRT, and then you can tokenize that into like a token that represents a deposit of the LRT on a lending protocol, right? But that's how we build in DeFi, is composing things. In order for that to all work, like, there needs to be liquidity, right? Like, you need to be able to atomically move between that stuff. And then most of these staking, restaking, right, like, you're providing security, which means that you can't atomically come in and out, right? Like, there's a queue, you have to wait a few days to get in, or weeks, or depending on the situation, but there's some time. So DEX is like a decentralized exchange. What it allows you to do is create these pools of liquidity that, like, they're equally valued assets. It's pretty easy to swap back and forth. There's not a lot of like risk trading, and basically make a little money providing faster access to those exchanges, right? Which then on top of that enables, lending and all of these other layers. I think what makes Balancer or DEXs different from centralized exchanges is two things. Like, one is you can do something atomically on chain, right? So if you want to liquidate a loan, you can do that all in one transaction, right? You don't have to wait. You can know, like, it's done or it's not done. And then the other issue is it's permissionless. So anybody can really go launch any pool they want on Balancer, and anybody can put any money they want in it. and anybody can trade out of it, right? And so for us, like we have BD and we help people get set up, but in the end, like we kind of don't need to be there, right? It's kind of hands off, and our job is maybe more like education and helping people understand how to use the protocol that we've deployed that's permissionless and on-chain, right, as opposed to facilitating it or like actually, yeah, I don't know, controlling anything.
But I mean, that's really important, right? Because if let's say we have Steve, right, or EGE to have that moneyness aspect, you need liquidity.
Yes.
There's really no way or no, like I can hold Steve, but do I really need it to be a token, right? It could be seen as a vault, right? I put it in a vault and then.
It's not liquid if there's no liquidity, right? Like the L in LST is about liquidity. And again, like you have that liquidity over a longer period of time anyway, right? You can stake and unstake, but that's really no different from not even having it tokenized. And so it is the idea that you create the token and then you can do stuff with it. And liquidity is the base of being able to do stuff, right? DEX liquidity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, if we go down that route, right, as with Steve or let's say with EGE, now there's so many. I mean, if you look at like 5 years ago, right, 3 years ago, there's already multiple different L1s. If you recall, like the L1 wars out there. But now there's so many different L2s. Like instead of previously was only Ethereum and then maybe expanded to like 10 or along that lines, and then now it's like I can safely say it's 40 to around 100 chains that is really actively used. What's the challenge, right? In terms of maintaining liquidity across all of these different chains, but also maintaining that same security principle with both data and cross-chain of your token as well.
Yeah, like so. Just in your first point around the liquidity, I think that is the most important point. Like from a Lido institutional perspective and the conversations I have with, say, different crypto funds and asset managers, that's all they care about is liquidity. They want to know how much they can sell and how long it takes to sell. And I suppose you can make the argument where if a big institution like BlackRock was suddenly to go use an L2, they would probably bring the liquidity with them. But like these big institutions don't want to do that. They want to see existing liquidity. And to your point around like, okay, different protocols may have 100 billion of liquidity versus 50 million. I think that's where an asset or a token like STETH is really important. This interoperability between different protocols and you're aggregating liquidity.
Well, and I think, so to further think about the security, like one of the properties of an LST or an LRT is that it grows, right? So STETH, it actually rebases, which means you hold it in your wallet and you just get more of it. There's then a wrapped version because that works better in DeFi, that there's not just kind of coins appearing out of nowhere, right? Where you can deposit and redeem and get more out. But like that all happens on mainnet, right? So there's a smart contract on mainnet called WSTETH that knows how many STETH or ETH one WSTETH is worth, and that's always going up. If you then want to take that, bridge that WSTETH to another chain, you need some way to know that rate, right? And there's two ways to do it. One is you let the market figure it out, right? So you've got like Uniswap v3 or various custom markets and people bidding and the market kind of figures it out. But the other thing is we have DEX curves that allow you to concentrate liquidity at peg for correlated assets. And if we actually have the rate on another chain, then you can build a pretty like perfect curve that really concentrates all the liquidity right where you want it. And then that's kind of where Chainlink comes in, right? Because they're very good at setting up these oracles, taking a rate from mainnet or wherever it happens to be, like depending on where that contract that actually holds the assets are, and transporting it to other places so that then you can use that to build liquidity or lending or other DeFi applications.
Got it. But once you expand to different chains, I mean, maybe Radlin, you can share with us, right? When you expand to different chains, how do you focus which chains to expand to? Because if, let's say, I'm asking you to expand to 10 different chains, right? I'm getting even more stretched as an initial growth startup, right?
Yeah.
How do you balance out the chains that you want to focus on and then deciding how do you keep the security principles as you bridge across to those chains as well?
Well, obviously, I'll speak to how we do it. Every protocol might be different. But for us, obviously, we have a sort of mega DAO, which is Magpie, right? We're speaking primarily on Eigenpie, which is our restaking protocol. But we have other protocols, and obviously these protocols have been built up over time, and through these different protocols, we've built up various relationships with different chains. So for us, we primarily focus where we have existing relationships, just because of ease of access, ease of doing business. So we'll focus on our BNB chains, arbitrums. I'm just saying those are generally our first ports of call, because we have those relationships in place. We have users in that space already, so we already have sort of adoption there. So we have users who are waiting for us to expand into an arbitrum or a BNB chain, who have liquidity and who want to deposit into our protocol. So that's kind of our go-to. And then obviously, if we're looking to expand out of these sort of arbitrums, BNB chains, then we're obviously looking at TVL. We're looking at use cases for the token. You know, so if a user has to go to a blast or a bit layer, whatever it might be, even though we're not talking about Bitcoin, yeah. You know, what would be the use case for the token there? How could they use it in DeFi? What are the options available? So it's all those sort of things that we look for. And as you said, it is very difficult to bootstrap on a new chain. You know, it takes up a lot of resources to really get liquidity going on a new ecosystem, and to get users to move onto those ecosystems, you know, especially if they are newer. So those are sort of the high-level points that we kind of look for, and that's kind of the strategy that's worked for us.
Got it. I mean, 2 days ago, we have also announced with Lido in terms of the ability to use CCIP to bridge what we term as direct staking from L2s, right? And I think that goes back to Ben's point, right? And Radlin's point, where it's very difficult to seed liquidity across every single chain that you're on, right? It's just very cost-intensive and resource-intensive. So I think that's something that we have unlocked alongside with Lido, is the ability to, and we have done that for Eigenpie as well, right? Yes. Being one of the launch partners. The ability for users with ETH on L2 to directly stake to get access to, be it rep stake ETH or EG ETH, and then bridge back to the L2 that they're on, right? So instead of just relying on the DEXs, right, you have the option. You can either do it with DEXs, or if you're doing a large amount that have massive slippage, you can do the direct method as well.
Yep, no, and that's cool, right? I think, because that is the challenge, right? You have to hit this critical mass for it to make sense, right? If you imagine a chain, you've got 50 ST ETH on there, there's like a little of it in a DEX and some on a lending protocol, right? It's kind of like nothing. Nobody's going to look at it. So once you've got 100,000 ST ETH on there, then everybody's going to be doing everything and people want it, right? But getting over that divide is incredibly hard. The way that it's been done in the past in DeFi is usually by like just adding tons of incentives on it, which makes it incredibly expensive. Yeah. And so if you can allow that organic activity to kind of like form somehow without spending that money, right? And maybe you get to the point where there's like, I just went from 50 to 100,000, but you're starting to get to the point where you're like, okay, this is getting towards critical mass. Then it's much easier to be like, okay, like let's throw a little bit of incentives on there. Let's figure out how to like push this over the edge and really get there.
Yeah, I mean, if we take a step back, if you look at the industry in specific, I think over the past 1 year, there's so much innovations that's happening, especially within this space, a lot of DeFi primitives that can be built on top of which, but how do you see in the next 1 year, right? The next 12 months, the next 24 months, how the trends, do you guys foresee any innovative trends within the LST or LRT sector?
The thing I'm really interested in is like what happens with LRTs, right? Like there's now all of this ability to validate in ABSs, and there's like so much possibility. There's a lot of people like doing stuff, and there's experiments and people trying things, right? But the real yields, in a sense, like where the actual value is coming from, is like you're processing enough transactions and charging gas, and like there's sufficient amounts of activity. So I think it'll be interesting. Like it will happen somewhere. I don't think it's really clear like where or what yet, and there's a million people trying a million different things, which is great. It's like the DeFi alchemy thing. But I'm really excited to see what emerges out of that, and I kind of have no idea what it'll be. It's a mystery.
Yeah. How's Lido looking at restaking? I mean, is this something that you guys are looking at? Or?
Yeah, I think the Lido strategy is focused on how stETH can be used for restaking. So, in June of this year, Lido collaborated with Mellow Finance around a restaking vault, Symbiotic, a permissionless restaking protocol. And I think for us, the real kind of focus is putting stETH on the center stage. I think stETH is the perfect asset to be used for restaking. Like, it has that network effect, it has the liquidity, and I think one really important point is that stETH is always earning the native staking reward 100% of the time. And I think for us, or excuse me, for myself personally speaking, I think that is why it makes the perfect asset.
If you look at capital markets, I think ETH ETF came up earlier this year, right? Bitcoin spot ETF came up and then ETH shortly after as well. This conference, we are also very much focused on the intersection between TradFi, capital markets, and DeFi. You guys have been speaking alongside and working alongside with different institutions as well. How do you foresee the intersection between capital markets and the ability to go into, let's say, like a LST or even like a LRT with additional composability on top?
So from my perspective, like I'm fortunate I speak to a lot of different issuers and exchanges, and I think a big part of it is education. Like if crypto people don't know what stETH is, what's the chances of people in pinstripe suits knowing what it is in Canary Wharf? So I think a big part of it, yes, is education, and I think the products that have been created today, like the Bitcoin ETF, 21 shares as an Ethereum staking ETP, these are great products for people to kind of dip their toe in the water and get exposure to crypto. I think the issue that some of these products have is they are very entry level. Like if people want to do something a little bit more advanced, they're quite limited in terms of options. So for example, like Ethereum staking ETPs today, like they are limited in terms of the amount of the AUM that can be staked, and it's typically around 50%. And the reason for that is they have to deal with redemption requests. If it was any higher, they would have issues. So one of the big things, I believe, is that a stETH ETP would be an excellent product. So in the sense of, again, 100% of the AUM would be staked. So again, from an investor point of view, everyone would potentially win.
Yeah.
Is the alpha?
Find out.
I mean, Radlin, you have also been working especially with the APEC-based institutions, right? How do you see the difference between the different geographical regions, right, in terms of capital markets adoptions of interacting with, let's say, like a LST or RRT in specific?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the sort of advent of the ETFs and that coming live, BlackRock speaking a lot around crypto, there is obviously far more institutions who are kind of peeking their ears, you know, to say, what exactly is this crypto all about? You know, primarily we've, from our experiences, seen more sort of eagerness to engage in the sort of APEC region, in the Asian markets. And I think that is something, I think the Asian markets are more, I don't want to use an incorrect term here, but maybe more open, more forward-thinking, you know, more sort of freer in their financial perspectives of kind of what could be possible, and open to exploring newer sort of technologies and newer sort of financial markets. So I think that's why you kind of, we've seen more sort of success in our discussions and outreaches to institutions in APEC regions. But I think it will kind of open up worldwide. Well, that's what we're all hoping for in crypto. We're hoping for this mass adoption. You know, we're hoping for ETH to go to 10K. We're hoping for Bitcoin to do 1 million. You know, that's where we're all hoping it takes us to. And I think it is starting to heat up in the institutional markets. I think, as I said, they are starting to take notice of the industry, and that's a first step.
100%. I mean, that's something that we are really focused on as well, to have wider adoption of this space, right? And just want to wrap things up, given the fact that we're at time. One, maybe last question, a quick fire, rapid question across all. What's probably like the next thing that you guys are doing within 10 seconds, and then how can people find out about you?
Me. Yeah, quick fire, Eigenpie. As we said, we are now currently the second biggest LRT by TVL. So we're just continuing to expand onto new chains with the assistance of Chainlink and the CCIP technology. So yeah, please, you can find us on Twitter, Eigenpie, EIGENPIE. Please follow us, and yeah, follow all our socials.
So Lido has always been institutional grade, but I would say in 2025 there will be an even bigger focus on making sure that Lido institutional and institutional adoption of liquid staking will be a big part of the focus.
Yep, and I guess I'd say like Balancer, we spent the last year really building a new DEX, Balancer V3. That's going to roll out in the next month or two, which we're all super excited about. I'm not sure there's actually that much different directly for LST, LRT liquidity day zero, but it adds the ability to do hooks and stuff, and so we do think that that'll open up a whole new design space, and we're super excited about it.
Cool, it's a wrap. Thanks a lot for having us today, and then gracing us with your parents, and hope everyone had a good time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.